Hello and welcome to another episode of Lay It on the Line featuring Perry, who is a sports journalist and a women's basketball fan. We're here today to talk about some very exciting new things that have happened in the WNBA, and there's a lot of change that's going to happen in the next week, potentially. There's a new deadline for the CBA, which is March 10th, and this will be a historic CBA for the WNBA as a franchise and for women's basketball players making more money. And so we're here to talk about it, to break down the numbers, and we'll also talk about Unrivaled at the end of the podcast.
Yeah, as everyone's been saying, including Adam Silver, we're reaching the 11th hour of discussions. The league has put really the first hard deadline since the beginning of negotiations, which is if you do not agree to this, or if we don't come to an agreement by March 10th, the season will not start on time. And so the stakes of this are huge because there are so many things that are lined up that need to happen before the season happens that in a normal world would have been happening since the end of last season to now. Things like free agency is really the biggest one because more than 80% of the league lined up their contracts so that they're free agents now to take advantage of this new CBA. So here's what needs to happen. Let's say that this contract is agreed to by March 10th. If it is agreed upon by March 10th, then the deal will be signed by the end of the month. Also keep in mind that the union has to vote on whatever is the proposed final agreement. So this isn't even done just because the union leaders say, okay, we're done now. Everyone in the league has to vote, which means that there's a lot more votes coming from people who are kind of in the middle of the league that aren't either the rookies minimum contract kind of players or the upper echelon max salary players.
So is that a majority vote?
So yeah, it's a majority vote.
Okay.
Totally democratic system within the union to agree to the proposal that whatever would be the last one sent from the WNBA. So then let's say it's done March 10th, then the expansion draft for the new franchises, because this year the WNBA is expanding, exciting, from 13 to 15 teams, happens April 1st to April 6th. Right after that, you have your free agent qualifying offers sent out, franchise tags sent out. Teams have 3 days to negotiate free agent contracts for 80% of the players in the league, which is a task all on its own. Then you have the WNBA draft, which is April 13th, your signing period, your training camp, your preseason, and the season starts on May 8th.
And this would all be normal. This is a normal timeline. The draft is usually on March 4th or April 14th. So all this is put in place as if there's no pushback, nothing's being compressed. This is totally normal. Why are we currently in this state of like an urgency, specifically right now? Like things feel hyper urgent, more than in previous CBAs.
Yeah, I think it's just that time is running out. First of all, there's been so much pressure put on this contract as this benchmark of the future of women's sports. It's not just the WNBA. I think there's this energy around this negotiation. Like, this is going to set the tone for women's sports moving forward. This contract is an agreement that would be 8 years long with an opt-out after 7 seasons. Let's assume they would take that opt-out because their value would be higher 7 years from now. So it's about a 7-year contract. What's going to happen to women's basketball between now and then? As most negotiations go, both teams want to hold on to their leverage as long as physically possible. So I think that's why we get to this last week of negotiations where we're feeling so stressed and anxious. I don't know about you, I'm feeling stressed and anxious because we want this to get done.
Like
the league wants this to get done.
And it's not going to be good if there is no season.
And a big reason we've gotten here is because the WNBA took 6 weeks to respond to a proposal from the players from December into the new year.
Right.
And then after those 6 weeks, basically said, we're not going to change anything from our last proposal. On Monday of this week, which was March 2nd, there was a press conference with Breanna Stewart, with Kelsey Plum, for the Unrivaled event that happened in Brooklyn, totally separate from this, except all the press reporters were asking about the CBA because we are in this final week and a half before the deadline. And it was really the first time that Breanna Stewart, Kelsey Plum conceded a little bit to the WNBA. They said things like, what we already have on the table would be a huge win. We haven't had revenue sharing in the past. This would be a huge win where we're at. Of course, we're still negotiating, but where we're at would already be massive progress.
Right.
That kind of puts all the power in the hands of the WNBA because they're hearing that thinking, this contract's 99% done. We just have to hold out and they'll agree. Because I think in the eyes of the WNBA, the players need this more than them right now.
Exactly.
That's the way that they're approaching this negotiation.
Right, and that is for multiple reasons, but most of it's financial.
Yeah,
Because
absolutely.
the WNBA players a lot of them don't have the money to be able to effectively sustain if there is no season. Obviously, they would go overseas. So a huge point of contention between the league and the players has been the revenue share and whether it's gross revenue or net revenue. So the league is proposing, I believe, 70%.
About 70%.
70% of net revenue.
Yep.
And then the WNBPA wants 30.
About 26 now.
Okay,
brought
it
down.
was 30, yeah, now 26% of gross revenue, so that means that they will be receiving their salary before the expenses are paid. So why is this such a big deal? Why is this conversation happening?
Yeah, it's a big deal because the WNBA is focused on sustainability, and that's been their consistent messaging throughout all of this. The WNBA is still, all things considered, a newer league. They are still trying to establish their base and grow the league as much as possible. So the WNBA's biggest concern right now is that they're going to overpromise the piece of the pie to the players. These players in this iteration of the CBA are going to benefit greatly from that. But how does that set up the players of the future in the 2030s if the WNBA is not maintaining the quality of the game, if the WNBA is not saving their money so they can reinvest it in certain ways as the league continues to grow, as the league continues to expand, they want to be set up for the future. The difference between that is the difference between gross and net revenue. So all this money comes in, you think revenue, you think ticket sales, merchandise, sponsorships are the big sources of revenue outside of the massive TV deal, which is $200 million a year, which we know off the bat starting next season. So when you think about the numbers of at least $200 million a year in revenue, however much on top of that, let's say $250 million total after the additional things are added, and I think that's a conservative estimate, well, then the players' salaries from what the WNBA has proposed right now, which is a $5.75 million per team. So next season, about $5.75 million per the 15 teams. That would be about $86 million total. The problem that arises from that is we don't know exactly where they're getting those numbers from.
Right, because they're not disclosing the numbers.
Mm-hmm.
And they haven't ever, right?
Yeah.
Right.
They do claim that they give audited tax forms to the WNBPA.
Okay.
So the players who are in the union supposedly know a lot more about the WNBA's finances and expenses than we do. The public, we know pretty much nothing other than what we can estimate.
Do you think that causes like lack of trust between like someone who's trying to, I mean, I wouldn't say like maybe trust, but it's just like maybe a little bit of a skewed perspective?
What I will say is the idea of gross versus net revenue, if you're a player, you're thinking, why do I get the leftovers? That's because net revenue, that's what that sounds like. I get the leftovers. You get to take care of yourself. You do whatever you want, and then whatever's left over gets distributed to us, even though we're the product that you're pushing out. And I understand how that can cause kind of distress as a player. You feel like you're being slighted. On the other hand, and I think what the players are moving towards eventually, which is accepting net revenue, 70+%, what's on the table right now of the net revenue, is going to end up being a lot of money. The estimates that are public right now say that the 70% of net revenue is about equivalent to 15% of gross revenue. Mm-hmm. But I think that's based on kind of conservative estimates. And if the WNBA has,
net revenue?
For just total revenue, what would be left over after the WNBA pays all of their expenses. So if the WNBA exceeds, like if they sell a ton of merch in Toronto, a ton of tickets in Toronto, these big arenas, if in Portland, their new franchises, think of how much money Golden State brought in. These expansion franchises, we don't know how much money they're going to generate, but some of them, especially in Canada, it's going to be a huge market. So if they bring in more revenue, the WNBA's expense costs stay the same. And all that's left over, then 70% of that gets distributed to the players. So that actually could end up being closer to 20% of what's the gross revenue at the end of the day.
It would just depend on how much money they actually brought in.
Yeah, it depends on how much money the league is making, the players, the sponsorships, on top of the TV deal, which is the only thing we know for certain right now, is that league revenue starts at $200 million. But the ceiling, we don't actually know. Like, record ticket sales last year, record viewership. That means that the cost of sponsorships goes up. You have on-court sponsorships on TV deals that are millions of dollars. The price goes up every year. So the WNBA can be bringing in a lot more money. They add a new market, that adds new expenses, that also adds new revenue. So I think that 15% number could be a little bit on the conservative side. And at the end of the day, 70% net revenue is going to be a significant boost for the players in the league.
Right. I know we'll talk about this later, but like our opinions on what they should do and like related to this, but there's another piece to this that will largely affect this whole conversation and what we think they should end up doing, and that is the salary cap. So the WNBPA, the union, proposed $9.45 million, and the WNBA has proposed $5.75 million. So what does what do these numbers mean? So when they say like it's a salary cap, like that's the most that any team will get essentially, and then it's distributed to like all the but there's 14 teams right now.
There's going to be 15.
Yeah, there's about to be 15 teams. So there's basically like a cap amount, and then it's distributed like to the players. Like, let's break those numbers down. Like, what do those numbers mean?
Yeah, so the salary cap is a hard number, $5.75 million for 12 roster spots. 7 of those are guaranteed, which is a proposal from the league. That was another new addition that is good for the players. It used to be you could only fully guarantee 6 contracts. Now you can fully guarantee 7 contracts. That was a small concession that the league added. So the league added a fully guaranteed roster spot, which means that 7 players on each team will have their salary fully guaranteed, even if they get hurt, even if they don't play a single game of the season because of whatever reason, other than them choosing to leave the team, which would be a totally different thing. But salary cap, so that $5.75 million, which grows over the course of this, and by 6 years from now, towards the end of this agreement, would be up to $8.7 million, which is a significant increase. So salaries raise every year.
So the WNBA is proposing that.
That is what the WNBA is proposing. So that number in a few years gets a lot closer to what the WNBA is asking for now. What this means, so the way that the salaries work is there are types of contracts. There is rookie contracts. The first overall draft pick makes more on a rookie contract than the 20th overall draft pick. There are vet minimums, which means if you're in the league for 3 years or more, they have to pay you at least this base salary for a contract. There's max salaries and there's super max salaries. So what's been proposed is that the super max, which would be the most expensive contract for a player.
So the top players.
Top players, the top of the top players.
Like an
could
Asia
take
Wilson,
up an Asia Wilson could take up 20% of the cap. So of that $5.75 million, that contract per team could take up 20% of that team's cap space. A max contract can take up 17.5% of that team's cap space. What that does is kind of eliminate super teams, because teams do not have the space to pay 2 supermax players.
Exactly.
If you pay 2 supermax players, you have 40% of your money that you could spend gone, and you have 10 players that you need to spend the rest of the 60%
so
on.
the disparity would just be huge.
Yeah. So you can totally front load your team and fill the rest with minimum contracts, but that's probably not the best way to go about building a sustainable organization. So you have the supermax, you have the max, we know the minimum. There's also been a huge boost to rookies in these contracts. That the latest addition to the CBA from the league, which is new, that was announced this week, is that if you're a rookie, a star rookie, a Caitlin Clark, a Paige Beckers, a Aaliyah Boston, and within the first 4 years, your rookie contract, you make an all WNBA first or second team, you are then eligible to immediately sign for a max contract after your rookie contract is done. That wasn't the case in the past. There's levels. You do rookie,
you
then
have
you
to-
have a kind of
right.
medium contract, and then after your medium contract, you could sign a max contract. That eliminates this for rookies that are stars
So it creates a way for like a Paige Beckers essentially
to make more money earlier on in her career.
Right, exactly.
And also, if you win an MVP like A'ja Wilson did in 2020, you're actually eligible for the Supermax contract. So 4 years into A'ja Wilson's career, theoretically, she could have been eligible for a $1.1 million contract. So there's quicker ways to get to the top. But again, so much of this focus is on the best of the best and the rookies. There's less focus on everyone else who fills in the gaps.
With this, so with the rookie contracts, part of it is that they have to stay at the same team.
Yes,
for
they
4
do.
years.
They do.
So do you think in a way that could maybe be a hindrance if maybe it is like a Paige Beckers who's on a losing team but wants to get this maxed out contract, that it could maybe not like sabotage them, but maybe in a way like keep them confined to a certain team, maybe restrain them a little bit?
Well, at the end of the day, it's a choice for Paige Beckers. If Paige Beckers wants to take less money to go to a title contender, that's her choice. She's in essentially free agency. But if she stays, let's say, with the Wings in this hypothetical scenario, she could max out that contract and make a lot more money than she would make going to another team, because other teams would only be able to pay her a certain percent. The Wings would be able to pay her a max contract.
Yeah, and I think also potentially along with having them stay for 4 years or so to be able to get the accelerate their contract as a rookie, it kind of in a way I think reminds me of like college, how like in college like you have to stay, women at least have to stay 3 years, but it helps build themselves as like a brand and like familiarity with the fans of the place, because if you're in Dallas,
Sponsorships too, connecting with the local market.
Yeah, if you're in Dallas for 4 years, that's like a long time to really build like familiarity with the fans there. Versus, you know, if you hop, that could be a little bit harder. And I think that's a big part of women's sports and women's basketball has been like brand deals and sponsorships for girls to get, or women to get paid money outside of like their on-court salary. So, yeah.
And expanding on the rookie contract part of this, previously rookie deals would only be worth, let's say, about 5% of the cap. In this latest proposal, the top rookies, the top of the rookie scale contract is what it's called, would be almost 10% of the cap. That is more than $500,000 straight from the draft. So we're reading this Substack article about, well, if the rookies take up that much of your cap space, you can't really draft for development, because you can't be wasting $500,000 on a player who you're not planning on playing at least 20 minutes a night. That player has to be worthwhile enough for you to come into your organization and make an immediate impact. Otherwise, why are we paying $500,000?
Another part of this conversation is housing, team housing versus players paying for their own housing. It's very dependent on the team, on the player, what they choose. But overall, recently there's been some controversy about this. Natasha Cloud came out with a statement saying that the middleman is kind of the one who ends up getting screwed in this conversation, because you have the people at the top that can obviously afford everything, and then there's the people at the bottom who are taking care
for the first 3 years.
Yeah, who are, at least for the first 3 years, like taken care of with team housing, but it's kind of the middleman that might be making like a minimum salary contract that they might not be paying as much attention to.
So that is Natasha Cloud. That is players like a Sophie Cunningham, even a Ryan Howard, who's in the middle of that. Players you think of as really good players, role players, players who can be huge parts of championship winning teams, players who deserve to be compensated fairly. There's also no difference in this proposed CBA between a minimum and a vet minimum, which means that if you're in the WNBA for 5 years, you could be getting paid just as much as a rookie who just got drafted. In the middle of that, in 3 years from now, that could be around $7 million. And so that minimum salary could be closer to $300,000 instead of $200,000. So we also have to think about how this scales up as the contracts go on, because $200,000 might not be the most for everyone to pay for their housing, but $300,000, the WNBA argues, is a significant enough amount of money that a player, as an individual, should be able to pay for a one-bedroom apartment regardless of where they live, whether that's New York City, LA, or Indiana.
Yeah. And that's Natasha Cloud in her video was basically like disagreeing with that. She was saying that she doesn't feel like that would be enough money for someone, I guess, because she is the Liberty in New York City to, like, it's not like it's unlivable, but I think she was saying that it's not like super comfortable still in her eyes. So that's what she said in her video. But I think the part that the WNBPA is kind of saying here is that if you're making at least 75% of the max salary, that you would not have team housing.
Yeah, you'd pay for your own housing.
Right, and then the other 25% making that amount would be eligible for team housing. So that's kind of the distinction there.
But I really think at this point, the WNBA has put out what they want, and they have barely budged throughout this entire process. Now that we're in the last week and they have all the negotiating power in their hands, what we have in front of us is what I think will be mostly representative of the final deal. Mm-hmm. The question is, what do you think? What about this proposal, Leia, is acceptable, do you think? And what do you think the players would look at this and think of as, I really, really wish we could change this?
Yeah, that's a great question. For me personally, I think probably the biggest area of growth would probably be, it's definitely between like salary cap and like gross or net revenue. I'd probably go with gross or net revenue, just because I think, like even just like psychologically, like I know the players have talked a lot.
It's the psychological part.
Yeah,
it really is.
They've talked a lot about like we're not an expense to them, and like that idea of like not feeling important. And I think that would carry a lot of weight if that was changed, for like monetarily, but also just in the way that they perceive the league valuing them.
I was wondering though, as a player, seeing that pretty significant boost come in as net revenue, approximately-ish, do you think that makes them think, okay, net revenue is real, there's real money coming from this, and if the league makes a lot of money, as we the players believe it will because we believe in ourselves and our product, we actually could get a lot of money from revenue sharing at the end of the day. 70% is a big number. I think it's hard psychologically, you don't want to feel like the leftover, but you also kind of think, well, what if WNBA expenses take up all the revenue and there's nothing left over for us? That's the fear at the end of the day, that there's not going to be anything left and 70% of zero is still zero.
Right. Yeah.
But with this revenue coming in and showing the players that already with their record ticket sales, with their record viewership numbers, they're passing these revenue benchmarks, that net revenue isn't so bad. Because we saw that distinct shift in the tone of the players, Kelsey Plum and Brianna Stewart, talking about how revenue sharing is a win. Where we're at with revenue sharing would be a significant win for us, which is true because they've never had revenue sharing at all in the past. So even if you want the gross revenue, the WNBA clearly is not budging on that unless you bring your number down another 10% maybe. And at that point, it
wouldn't be much different.
Wouldn't be much different at all, because that's kind of what the equivalent approximation of the 70% net is supposedly right now. So I do think players maybe could be helped to realize or just accept, okay, net revenue is a real thing. There will be revenue left over. There will be money for us. And let's not consider it the leftovers, because expenses need to be paid, and the expenses that are being paid benefit us. The expenses that are being paid are our hotels. They are our facilities. They're the security guards that protect us when we go to the airport. So it's not like the WNBA is pocketing all that money. The WNBA's expenses benefit the players at the end of the day as well. So when you kind of put all that together, you could shift your mindset as a player from we're just getting the leftovers to we could go out and kill this shit, excuse my language, like we could go out and have an amazing season if we start on time, have amazing new TV deal, amazing new sponsorships, and teams that are joining our league and we're only expanding and we're only growing, and we could go make so much money that 70% of the net revenue would be a significant boost to us.
So you're team 70.
I'm just team. I think it's not as bad of a proposal as it sounds off the bat when you think about just the general concept of gross versus net revenue.
Like, would you, if you were to go like to the next CBA, like would you, like maybe in 7 years, 8 years, whatever, like would this be something that you would think to yourself, no, we need gross revenue?
Maybe in 7 or 8 years, because there's room for growth in the future of the league. And in 7 or 8 years, this league will look completely different. It'll be way bigger. It'll have, if it's still around, like doomsday, whatever. But in 7 or 8 years, I expect the WNBA to be fully functioning. And at that point, they would have a better understanding of how much money net revenue is in a given year. And maybe at that point, they could make that shift to gross revenue. And the WNBA, I think, in that position would maybe be more open to that because they would also have a better understanding of what it costs to run the league at this next level that's closer to matching the facilities and the expectations of men's professional sports around the country. Because that's really what's happening here is the WNBA was on a certain level. Now they're making a huge step up in terms of operations. As we've talked about so many different things related to the CBA. We have talked about revenue sharing. We have talked about housing. We have talked about salaries and salary cap. Now I'm kind of wondering for you, Leia, since I think in all of this I've represented more the side of the league and you've represented more the side of the players. Which works out as a basketball player. Guys, Leia's going to play professional basketball in Australia, just so you know, very shortly.
I just signed a contract, so I'll be going to play in NBL 1 in Sydney.
Which is
in about
very
3 weeks.
exciting.
Yes, thank you.
So Leia understands as a player, and I'm more of a journalist and scholar, so I'm trying to think about the league and just also represent that side because it's important when you're having conversations to think about people on both sides and the perspectives they might be bringing to the table. What do you think are the biggest barriers to signing the contract right now, and do you think by March 10th we'll have a deal on the table?
And women's basketball in general is like a very leftist leaning. I honestly would say that I think that might not, I think everyone probably, not everyone, but I think a general consensus, no matter if you're making a lot or a little, is we all need to make more.
Yeah.
So in terms of it representing capitalism in a way of how you have top earners who might be nah, I'm good, I'm making a few million, these people at the bottom, that has nothing to do with me. I don't think the WNBA functions that way. I think the people at the top, an Asia Wilson,
she already took a pay cut for the Aces to bring teammates
on.
So there are precedents for players taking pay cuts so that they can play on a stronger team.
Yeah.
That happens everywhere, NBA, especially in the WNBA. There are precedents for that.
Yeah, that's a great example. I think it would more so be everyone kind of banding together and saying we all need to elevate each other. Probably most specifically with that gross revenue, net revenue. I think they might be trying to target that one the most. Yeah, I definitely generally tend to be in agreement more so with the player narrative, I would say. Mm-hmm. Probably just as a player myself and kind of being in that world. So last night was the semifinals here in New York. I went to it. It was amazing. They sold out. It was the first game was the Vinyl and the Phantom. The Phantom won, and then the next game was the Mist and the Breeze, and the Mist ended up winning shockingly because I don't know if you watched it, but
I couldn't actually.
They played horrible. In every way possible. They started the game, I think, down 15-0. It was
really?
Yeah, it was bad. I
had no idea.
It was they had a lot of fouls. It was very bad. And then at the very end, because you know how the fourth quarter, it's not to time, it's to score. Mm-hmm. So that definitely played into their advantage because they were able to catch back up. And then Enrique hit the game winner. So that was super exciting.
Was it her birthday? I feel
yeah,
I saw somewhere it was her
birthday. Yeah, it was her birthday too, yeah. But we just wanted to look back at what our predictions were and see how they've changed. So for me, I had Rose number 1, Miss 2, Owls 3, but that was before Nafisa got injured. So both of ours were before Nafisa got injured.
Yeah.
So in my mind, no lie, if she was injured, I would have bumped them to below the Breeze. So then I have Vinyl 4, Breeze 5, then I would have put Owls 6. And then I had Phantom and then Laces. So I had Phantom 7, who ended up being 1. That was my worst pick. And then, but without that one, I had Missed It 2, which they did end up being 2. And then the Vinyl 4, who was 6, but they were in the semifinals. And then if the Breeze were bumped up, if I moved the Owls down after Nafisa got injured, then I would have had 3 of the top 4.
Let it be known on the pod, you could go back, video evidence exists. I said that my top 2 underrated sleeper teams were the Mist and the Phantom. Leia laughed in my face about the Phantom. Also, at the time, I think Satu Sabli was supposed to play on the Phantom. She had a concussion, and then Isaiah James just emerged out of nowhere. She's had an amazing season for the Phantom. But I just said at the time that the Phantom were hustlers, and that I thought that they could really put it together when needed. So I feel pretty good about those 2 picks. I think I did have the Breeze and the Rose also up there towards the top of my rankings. I had the Vinyl way lower than they ended up finishing. The Vinyl and the Hive were for me down towards the bottom, and the Laces also towards the bottom.
I think the Mist have a good chance.
Yeah, I also agree. I think the Mist are going to take this one, which would be very exciting for the aforementioned Veronica Burton and co.
Exactly.
So.
Yeah. So we'll see. I think it's on Wednesday, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, Wednesday night, 9:30, I believe. So it's exciting stuff. But thank you for tuning in to this podcast. Look forward to more in the future as we hear more updates about the CBA in the next few weeks. And yeah, thanks for watching.